We are ready.
All right, ready to
We're
get
muted.
started with the
Oh, we are?
chamber.
Let's mute that.
Wow, it looks like we're muted, yeah.
Are we meeting? Are we ready?
Yeah.
We are.
Okay.
Yes.
Hi, Jessica.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
I'm Troy tonight, so he's not here. Troy's on vacation, so I will be presenting a new chamber program tonight. He really wanted to be here, so I'm going to steal his thunder and present this to you as quickly as I can. Selby, you want to go to the next slide?
I'll try.
You're the best, Selby. I know Andrea's gone.
You speak that then?
I did. It worked when Andrea was showing me earlier. How was that? I was
Yay.
scrolling.
Okay. There we go. Okay, your Chamber of Commerce serves nearly 500 members. We serve the city and the region by marketing, producing events, operating visitor services. So to ensure that tourism is making positive impacts now and for the future, the Leavenworth Chamber Board of Directors recently adopted a new sustainable tourism management plan that not only provides structure and direction, but also will help expand our impact into new projects. Our new approach, which we are calling Destination Smart, builds off the desire to balance the needs of marketing and destination management, which was a very common thread in the Our Valley, Our Future master plan, as well as the 2024 Visit Chelan County Tourism Management Plan. And this balance is the framework for the Chamber's operations in relation to managing, marketing, and planning for our tourism industry. Next slide, please.
All right, sense of the wheel.
There we go. So the approach strives to balance the needs of the industry and area residents, provide education to our visitors, leverage our events to create revenue streams for local nonprofits, develop responsible infrastructure projects to maximize sustainability. There are 5 properties or pillars of Destination Smart for our goals and strategies. Those are funding it forward, visitor flow management, and I'll go over these next, of course, communication and monitoring, destination development, and climate and resiliency. And what we knew is that we needed a better way to organize some of the sustainable changes and programs that we already had been doing. And then by creating this framework, it will serve as the lens in which we look through for all of our future planning, our plans, our programs. Next slide, please. So the first one is funding it forward. Again, finding creative ways to ensure that when we are using lodging tax funds for events, that every one of our events that we use lodging tax dollars has a fundraising opportunity for a local cause or a member nonprofit. Great examples of these that we've already done, of course, is the Carvings for Causes, which was in May. We auctioned those off. They benefit programs like the backpack program, the swim lessons, the school supply program. The Manuela Christmas concert in December, all those proceeds benefited the food bank in December. And then, of course, our Christmas Town ambassadors, Oktoberfest ambassadors, continuing with the great tradition of volunteerism in Leavenworth. This event support for us is the financial, and there's the financial contribution for their nonprofits. In 2023, more than $80,000 was raised in the Funding It Forward pillar. Next slide, please. Visitor flow management. So designing events to reduce negative community and regional impacts. What have we already done? Well, of course, the big one was removing the tree lighting ceremony. That was from our biggest event in Leavenworth history, of course. That one was the first one we did. The lights on always approach to move traffic into those other months, you know, to try to mitigate for those big weekends. And then most recently is the reducing occupancy of Oktoberfest and hours of operation, which we see as a huge benefit to the community and the residents, and that's working, of course. Second, reducing impacts to provide visitor services at highly visited recreation locations. Of course, that's how our Recreation Ambassador Program came to be. We are on our 4th year of that. Those ambassadors are all those very busy trailheads and river put-ins and takeouts, giving important information to our visitors on how they can be better stewards of the land and be safer. And that program, again, 4 years. And then lastly, assisting in traffic, transit, parking, and trail expansions. For us, that was the sensing document, the support of the sensing document in 2023. If you're not familiar with that, that was the Upper Wenatchee Valley Sustainable Trails Project, facilitated by TRED to identify recreation needs, additional trails and maintenance for those trails in the Leavenworth area. Next slide, please. Communication and monitoring, that of course falls under my lap hat. And so what we have been doing and what we continue to do is use visitor data to make informed decisions on how we market. And also on event planning, of course, that's also the other piece that we do. Providing destination education to our visitors through the Give a Schnitzel campaign. You all have seen the messaging, you know what that campaign is about, but it's really asking our visitors to be better visitors, to know when to come, to know before they go, those types of things. And then collaborate with other organizations to increase event and marketing efficiency. This year, we are partnering with TED Driven. That is new on the new Mayflower Run or the May Blumen Lauf. If you were Ernest, you would say it better than I. But of course, that run in history, we always, the Mother's Day 5K benefits Cascade Medical Foundation. That will be also benefiting from their, and they're also going to do a 10K and a half marathon. So besides their own initiative, so they're a great organization to partner with. And then of course, we will continue to monitor and collect visitor data. We have been doing that. You have seen Troy come numerous times and sharing the Springboard and Traffics, the Datafy, and of course, all the data that our ambassadors take when they're up on the trails and at the river. Next slide, please. Destination development is the 4th pillar of the destination of, of the Destination Smart Framework. Supporting the downtown master plan implementation. Both Kevin and Troy sit on that group, as you know. And then, of course, supporting the Bavarian theme is in everything that we do. It is the key to our success, from including Bavarian elements in our events like our Fetzug, to trying to get the beer wagon back up and running, to having a wonderful Bavarian closet that's accessible to everybody who wants to dress in traditional Trachten. Those are kind of pieces that are part of that, as well as supporting other events that have Bavarian elements, like the International Alphorn Festival is a great example. Next slide, please. Last pillar of climate and resiliency. We have been working really hard to work towards being zero waste. Examples of that is not using single-use plastic, which we don't do, composting our cups up at the Winton Mill, and then offering lots and lots of trash diversion stalls, and working with Waste Loop on that at all of our events. The next slide, please. So like I mentioned before, the Chamber Board recently met at their retreat, and as part of that have set new goals and initiatives underneath the Destination Smart Framework for this year. They are all at different stages of implementation. So I will go over what we are doing now. Next slide. In the funding at Forward pillar, they have added to increase the non-chamber event support for 2024 under youth sports. The chamber will be sponsoring the Leavenworth Soccer League. They will also be supporting sponsorship for a fan favorite and local favorite, the Banff Film Festival, which is being produced by the Leavenworth Winter Sports Club, which are wonderful partners of ours. Next slide. Under visitor flow management, looking at what we call the muddy season or the off season, trying to bring back a film festival, potentially collaborating with some of our film festival partners, and or maybe a new concert series during a time when we could have more visitors, as well as maybe they're looking at some outdoor venues. They're kind of working on those pieces. We're also redesigning a downtown walking map That's not on this particular slide, but that is part of visitor flow management, a better walking map, which will be a distribution piece for folks before they get here, as well as being here. And hopefully those maps will also be available at the parking areas where we're in talks with that currently. Next slide. And then, of course, communication and monitoring moving forward this year, utilizing the Give a Schnitzel campaign and the drive markets, both in and out of market. So our Give a Schnitzel campaign, which of course, you know, is our sustainability and stewardship campaign, it will continue to kind of lead our initiatives this year. And one very large change for this year is we're replacing all traditional destination marketing in our drive markets with only sustainable messaging, which means we are not advertising to our drive markets the way we have typically done. We know our drive markets are strong. We all saw it in December when they came. The only thing that kept people coming was the weather. So those markets are only going to receive those sustainable messages in and out of market before they get here and when they get here. What we also know from our data, since we have such great data, is we have identified our stronger flight markets. This is a longer game, takes a little bit longer on your return of investment. However, those types of visitors in the future would stay longer, spend more money, and probably be much less impactful as a visitor. So that's where we're going to be focusing our attention through the LAP committee this year. Next slide, please. And under climate and resiliency, they have some plans to assist with glass recycling. I don't know the details on that at this point, but I can tell you that under resiliency, myself and Selby and CARE recently met with Chelan County Emergency Management and Chelan County Sheriff's Office to talk a bit about bomb threat messaging, those types of things. We are going to be working on some fusion training, and that hopefully will go into effect in the spring. So more to come on that. And next slide, please. Last, destination development. Actually, those two slides might have been swapped, but destination development. The Chamber Board of Directors has a community development committee working on some projects. I think Troy will have to share with you later because I don't know about those, but I do know that under a new initiative this year to invest time, support, and or funding for programs that strengthen workforce development and workforce housing, the Chamber Board has donated $50,000 to the Upper Valley Men's Solid Foundations for workforce housing, as well as under workforce development. Troy has been working with the school to develop and fund a $10,000 scholarship fund, as well as find ways to sponsor additional training for high school students, whether it be tourism related or programs that the school just can't currently fund. So those are things that are in the works. And then another, yep, thank you. Funding, of course, and support for these new initiatives are only possible because of the revenue we earn from the production of Oktoberfest in Leavenworth. This event has allowed us to implement these funding initiatives. And while it's amazingly hard work, we are very grateful to be able to do it. And then lastly, by following the Destination Smart approach to our vibrant tourism industry, we ensure that it continues to be and contribute, to the health and well-being of our city, our region, our economy, and our environment. And that is the quickest review of Destination Smart, which I know Troy, he'll be having more conversations with you probably next month when he also presents the new economic report to you. I believe that's on his agenda for next month. So there you have it. And I can try to answer questions if I know the answers. If not, I will defer to Troy later.
Any questions or?
Hey, Jessica. Oh,
Go ahead.
Yeah. Hi,
it's
Rona.
Rona. Hi. You and I used to work with you in the same industry. So, and I love what you're doing. I have a question about, what's an example of a sustainable message to your drive market? What do you say to them?
Oh, we say things like, I should have showed you some of our ads, but It'll be a call to action. It'll be a something like, if you're going to be in outdoors, we ask you that you be kind to outdoors, and it'll be a photo of maybe the trail or something like that. So I would be happy to kind of, I'm just working on our summer sustainability campaign right now. I will send some of those examples over for you to look at if you'd like.
Yeah, okay, that'd be good. And then I can talk to you separately. We have a lot going on tonight, but I'm curious
Oh,
about
sure.
other aspects of what you brought up too. So yeah, let's talk about that. That'd
Oh,
be great.
absolutely. Anytime. And Troy, like I said, he would love to sit down with anybody that has more questions or anything like that. But we're
Thank
excited
you.
about it. I think it's great framework and it's a great lens for us. Like we said, but this is how all of our decisions will be made moving forward. I think it's smart, but lots of destinations are struggling. Obviously, it's a common theme among busy destinations, but we've been doing some great things. And I think just putting it in this nice framework makes a whole lot of sense for us.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I was gonna ask you about, how on board is the downtown core as far as glass recycling? Have you got
Well,
a feel?
I wish I could answer that for you because I wasn't in those particular conversations. So I don't have the answer for that. I would hope that they would be,
Right.
I think it's something that's missing, right? It needs to
Well,
be
I'm
easy
just thinking
to
of all
do.
the glass that's generated and that the loop is maxing out, but there's one way we can actually make it pay for itself if we had full participation.
Yeah.
And
Well, I
so-
think that's what this is about for the board, is getting the businesses to have a program that they can get on board, right? So, yeah.
Okay.
Well, thank you.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Jessica.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Have a great night.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next is our code consistency discussion. Willis?
Thank you, Mayor, council members. So we got a really overview of this last meeting. This study session has a nice little breakdown of the proposed amendments. The reason we do code consistency amendments is because as we use the code and as times change, how the code gets interpreted might change. Other code amendments affect various parts of the code that weren't readily acknowledged or known at the time when we did the original code amendments. So taking time each year to clean up the codes and make sure that they make sense between the different sections, chapters, and titles, and that in this case, some duplication be removed so that we don't run into inconsistencies later on. But also, it's a good time to say, hey, we're looking at, for example, home occupations. We're realizing that we're getting a lot of people who are just, signing checks at home or working on a computer at home. Is there a way we can streamline the process for them? So that's in here. So all these little things come up that don't really fit into a bigger code amendment process. And we want to capture them on a regular basis to ensure that our codes are functioning the best they possibly can. So that's the purpose of the code consistency review. We did do one last year, and I believe one the year before that. In your study session agenda, I took directly from the staff report the list of amendments addressed A through P. It's pretty extensive. And then in under tab C, you do have the staff report itself with all of the attachments in there. So how would you like to proceed with the review? Is it easier to turn it over to you with questions, or would you like me to walk through each one and see if there are questions on them?
What's your pleasure?
Well, I looked it over and I have questions on some, but not others. I wonder if you could just walk us down the list with a super short summary and just see if anyone has questions, and we can do them in order.
Sure. So A is very straightforward. That's the duplication. B, we talked about this last meeting. This is the design review board has some review of multifamily and they've asked not to do that. And we agree it's not really necessary. So we're removing, development within the multifamily zoning district would not go to the design review board. The criteria for their development still exists and we're not changing that. Any questions on B?
I'm a little lost. Can you just read like what the summary, like lighting standards, residential parking? I'm not sure where you're at. Do you guys?
I'm under your tab A, your agenda.
Okay,
She's just going down the list there on the
okay,
outline.
I'm looking at the details. So like B is called lighting standards. That's where I made my notes.
She has something called overview with all those letters, A through P.
Yeah, I get that, but I didn't make my notes there. I made them in all the details that follow in the code. So I just need to line those two things up.
It looks like there's page numbers on her document. Can you tell her what page number?
Page 1 of 35. Proposed amendment code, page 1.
Oh, she's
of
in
30
tab C.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah, I get where you're at. The challenge with going through the actual amendments themselves is that some of them are just grouped together in the overall summary, A through P. The other challenge is that then we're just diving into the weeds of the actual amendment as opposed to staying more conceptual with what's occurring. Gosh, I can go either way. It's just one's gonna take going through the actual code itself is gonna take a bit longer. So let me start this way. Council members, are there any questions that were identified on the A through P that you have? And then I'll go to the 1 through 35. Uh-oh.
You said, uh-oh, are you okay?
Well, my computer just said window diagnostic running.
Oh, we can still see you and hear you.
Okay.
I don't have any questions for A through P. I had trouble following along in tab C because there's no alphabetical organization associated with all of the line items, so it's hard for me to know what these specific amendments are in tab C in reference to A through P.
That's what I'm
And
saying.
that would be really helpful to have,
Yeah.
so that we know what we're talking about.
Okay, so let's walk through that lighting standards. That is the multifamily. You'll find that it pretty much goes in the same
yeah,
order.
it's one dot.
Mhm.
Yeah, but I was able to sit down with Zeke and talk to him about it, so I think he sees that now too. But in any case, B is lighting standards. That's the multifamily. This is one of those things that had been going to the design review board that can be addressed more administratively. Any questions on that?
Actually, that's one I do have a question on.
Yes.
I guess my concern is that in the comprehensive plan, it's stated that lighting has to be reasonable within a neighborhood. And I believe, because we studied this on our street, I believe it means that you can't have a porch light or lights in your house that actually light up the neighbor across the street or in the next person's yard. And so my concern with, and I think that's important. I like a dark night sky here. I think it's a neat thing that we can have. And so I'm concerned that if that isn't adequately reviewed, that downlighting will not be a priority. And the more dense buildings become, the more units, the more bright they become. So I don't know if they're tied together, but if they are, I would have a concern there.
No, the design review board was just looking at the light fixtures themselves. The standards for, shielding and not causing direct light onto a neighboring property, those are always been reviewed administratively.
Okay.
Um, residential parking standards. This is where we had talked about the bed and breakfast. And we or addressed the density already. So the only remaining item was, can a B&B have access from the alley? Once the density issue was addressed, which it was addressed last year, the planning commission had noted that they would like B&Bs to have access from an alley. So this is that addition. It doesn't change the overall density or any criteria for parking standards, just whether or not they have to put a driveway in the front yard. If there is no alley, of course, they'll still access from the front, from the street. But where there is an alley, they'll have this alternative, which the planning commission feels will help retain more of a neighborhood feel. Are there any questions on this section?
I don't know what section
Um,
we're on.
The question I had was, so they have to meet the standards that it has to be,
Here.
has a front street, like minimum width of 10 feet, that's all, it's got all criteria that needs to meet in the alley.
Yeah,
Well,
the driveway stays the same.
Okay.
Okay.
So she,
All
so you can go back.
Okay.
She's in the.
She's in there.
So flipping the page 2 of 35, we had boundary line adjustments. This little section of code says that non-conforming historical lots can basically be retained if they have 75% of the original lot area. And that section of code was in the zoning code. Well, in order to implement it, it would require the boundary line adjustment. And we wanted to make sure that people understood that this applied and how it applied and could utilize it uniformly. So we're moving it here to the criteria of the boundary line adjustment while still retaining the original reference in Title 18, which is the zoning code. Are there any questions on this section of code?
Does that mean like boundary line adjustment that includes them in the city boundary? Is that what that's all about? Or what?
No, it's between properties. So some of the historical lots have like lot 1 and 2 of the Leavenworth plat.
Okay,
Those each might have been, 10,000 square foot lots. And then they built a house and it might be over top of part of that boundary. But so long as they retain a minimum of 75% of the original lot size, they can modify that lot line to make sure that both lots can still be built on.
okay. Thanks, Linda.
Well, if,
Yes.
either before, either now or later, I had questions on the tab A sheet. And I didn't catch that when you were doing it because I was trying to do something else same time. So would you want to do that now or just wait?
Which one was it?
She's talking about the overview sheet that you asked
Oh.
for earlier and she.
Well,
her
We
question.
we may get to it yet, so just hang in there, Sharon.
Okay,
Because
sure.
we're gonna continue walking through. So that was the boundary line adjustment. On page 3 of 35, we have the development standards. This is under Title 14, and we're looking at moving it to Title 17, which is our subdivision regulations where this mostly applies. And Tom Wacholder and myself kind of talked about what standards we actually utilize when people are doing new construction, say of the streets and the utilities that go with it. And so this section is simply removing what we don't utilize and adding what we do. Are there any questions on that? Uh, 4 of 35 is the home occupations. Under definitions, it had some intent language. Intent might also be called purpose. And we're moving that to the zoning chapter because it fits more in the regulation than the definition. We also modified the definition of a group A home occupation. Just minor changes there and a minor change to group B occupation. Then we get in.
Lilith,
Mhm.
on, page 4 of 35, chapter 21, 90 definitions,
Yes,
where it says, excuse me, or operated within a residential dwelling unit or building accessory to a residential dwelling unit. Does that mean you could put a business in an ADU?
Yeah, you could operate your home occupation in an ADU when it meets the criteria of that home occupation, either A or B. And so there are size limitations on both of those. And those are already in code and on the following pages.
Lilith, do you think there's any need to add to the definition, basically outlining that people who work from home that are not running a business, but do remote work or work from home as their employment do not meet the definition of home occupation?
As you know, I don't think so because I think it actually muddies the water, but I hear what you're saying as we did have a hiccup with that this year. Typically, we catch these home occupations with the business license. So if they come in with a business license, say they are selling Mary Kay. Okay, you have to get a business license. We see that. How are you selling it? Are you going out to their home? Or are you having people come into your home? We ask them questions and find out if they're a group A or B. People who are just generally like Microsoft workers doing their own office work from their home, they don't require a business license. We shouldn't ever need to have this discussion with them.
Okay.
Lilith, I had
Yeah.
a question on, so they're operating some kind of business in the residential section. So that's what home occupation is all about, is making
Yes.
money. Okay. So, one question I had, if they just come in, get their business license, there's no review, there's no anything like a CUP or anything like that. It's just as far as determining if there's an impact on the neighborhood. Is there any process that we go through to determine that? Or I know there's one occupation A was less, it seemed like it had less impact or smaller, and
Mhm.
occupation B was larger operation, customers, more workers, that sort of thing.
That's
So-
correct. Yeah.
So is there a way
Yes.
that we monitor that, or that there's a problem with the neighborhood that isn't operating there, or we just allow it?
It's an allowed use, if it meets the criteria. If, they are operating and violating the criteria and we learn about that, then we can go back to them and say, hey, we need to either remove your business license, modify how you're operating so you can meet the criteria, or, move you to a zoning district that allows it. In my years here, I haven't gotten any complaints on home occupations. So we're seem to be pretty well capturing the different types of uses and regulating them as far as I can tell.
Okay. One thing I had a question for is, can you operate, say, some business, daycare or whatever you're doing, product, and also have, because it says that transient accommodations and lodging on that property are prohibited. So is
Mhm.
that's saying that it won't, if you have a business, one business, you can't have a bed and breakfast there also. Is that what that's saying? No transient accommodations?
Depends on the type of business you're doing. You can't do a daycare without a conditional use permit. So that's
Okay.
already defined in the code and regulated at a higher standard. Same with
Okay.
bed and breakfast. If you have a bed and breakfast and you also want to sell Mary Kay, you can do both of those things. Typically, we would bump you up to the highest review level. So the bed and breakfast requires a conditional use permit. So ideally, we would process those two things together. your home occupation for Mary Kay sales. And I don't even buy Mary Kay. I don't know why I'm saying this, but any case.
I don't either. I don't either.
Just
So,
got stuck in my head. But any case, both of those would go to the hearing examiner, review it out in their totality. Just that's the general rule. You try to capture it with the highest level of review.
okay, so just one other question is, say you want to do massages, right? You have customers coming, you have a studio, you're doing that, plus you're running a bed and breakfast. Any issues there?
Well, it's the same question. So we
Okay.
do have a person who's going through a group B occupation where she's gonna have customers come for a massage. So that's getting noticed this month. That's up off of Titus Road. And we'll go through an administrative review, and if she can meet the criteria, we'll take public comment and we'll make a decision. If she was wanting to do a B&B, we'd bump that all up to the hearing examiner with the B&B review.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
Thanks.
I have one question about this, just a clarification. I'm on chapter 21.90 definitions, home occupation. And so all that information about while maintaining the peace, quiet, and residential character of all residential neighborhoods, et cetera, that gets deleted there and then it's put in a different place, right? Under home occupations.
Yes, on 5 of 35, you see it there.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Okay, I'm gonna move past home occupations. Please review that independently and let me know if you have questions on it. But to make sure that we get through more of this process, I want to move on to page 10 of 35, which is the next section. And this is a new chapter, 14.50, and it's titled Fees, Bonds, Development Agreements, and Cost Sharing. We have each of these components in various sections of the code. In the past, our legal counsel has says it'd be nice to pull them into one location, particularly development agreements where they don't all say the same thing. So we wanted to make sure they all say the same thing, treated the same, and easily identified in the code. So most of this section is just moving code sections into this new chapter. And so is there any questions on the bond chapter? Okay. That section of code is followed up by other sections that needed to have modifications to the reference. So page 14 of 35, you'll see that in the zoning code, we're now referencing that surety and performance bonds be consistent with the 1450. We did the same with the next one, 17, which is the subdivision chapter. We're referencing the new 1450, and we're doing that in a couple of their sections. And that brings us to page 17 of 35, where we had in the environmental section, a surety bond in Title 16, and we're referencing the new 1450. And then a little out of order, but the same idea. Go back to 17, there's another final reference to 1450. So at the end of 1735, we have a new, we continue with the design review board, and they had a section in their K, which is crossed out 19 of 35. That crossout section has all been moved up to 1450. So that's all moving code and trying to be more clear. You can tell being clear takes getting muddy first. I just read a quote, you can't clean a stream until you stir the silt. That's what we're doing. Any case, that brings us to 20 of 35. yard requirements. That was a duplicate section, simply removing that. 22 of 35. We have the non-conforming single-family dwelling additions. We're trying to move this chapter to the non-conforming section of code rather than just the zoning standards. So that's just moving that section. In your final ordinance, you'll probably have all blue section, you'll have an all strikeout section because that's the way our code publishing wants to process this. So it might look a little different in the final ordinance, but the work will be the same.
Lilith, had a question on
Yes.
page 22 of 35 about, so permitting bed and breakfast facilities annexed into the city. I think it's 22 of 35 is like 18 and it's 52-12. But it's talking about bed and breakfast annexed into the city after January 24th. 2017. Why are we giving them 5 years in which to, if they're non-conforming, to either obtain a conditional use permit for that?
I believe that's in the existing code, so let me pull it up really quickly, but if you go to 1836,
Which is,
I'm trying to,
okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
Eighteen 38 bed and breakfast.
Wouldn't that be moot because we're beyond 5 years from January 24th, 2017?
Yeah, it's on page 22 of 35.
Yeah.
Oh, so if we annex now, it would give them 5 years. I got it.
Mhm.
And can you give an example of that?
I don't know how to give an example of that. It's just if annexing new land that contains a bed and breakfast, they'd have a period of time to come into conformity with the conditional use requirements that we've adopted because they were probably permitted under old regulations in the county, or they'd have to stop operations. What I was aiming for here is trying not to discourage annexation, trying to find that balance, because we do want people to annex. So that's where that came from.
So currently, there's no time frame. They're just allowed to continue as a non-conforming use if they're annexed.
Yes, that's correct. I'm just reading it. They have no timeline at all right now. And they just are non-conforming. And so I'm trying to rein it in a little bit, but I didn't want to make it so tight that they would refuse to be annexed. There's lots of ways of annexing property, but it's much easier if the property owners agree, all the way around. So that's how that language came about.
Okay, so I'm just thinking 5 years is a little excessive.
Yeah, I agree.
Thinking more 3 years. I think that's 36 months to come into compliance. Just, I think they need 60. Because we have, for folks, there was a stipulation that folks who had bed and breakfast in the city had a year to make that change, that we're not, right?
Well, that's a different change.
That's a different deal, but I know
Yeah.
that. This time span was a year. So,
Yeah. That was in order not to lose their vesting if they want to sell in
Sell
this
it.
next year. Mhm.
right.
So
Okay.
Lola, how would this play out if at some point in the future, we're at our maximum 4%? And they don't have an opportunity to get a permit for their bed and breakfast? My guess is that they likely would just not annex, right?
They would they would opt not to annex or try not to annex. But if say it was an island and we were annexing them, under protest. You know, maybe, or we already had the 60% of their neighbors in agreement and they came in with that group. Yeah, it would be a tough situation. Do we just keep allowing them as non-conforming indefinitely?
I don't think so.
No.
Yeah.
Is there a non-conforming something that's that's kind of universal that that would be considered in this, just for an example?
There's lots of non-conforming structures and uses in the community, and the general rule is they can continue indefinitely. If they want
Your connection breaking up.
Breaking up.
to expand, there's
Well, you broke up a bunch on that last
well,
minute or two.
oh,
Yeah,
oh, sorry about that. Non-conforming uses can continue indefinitely if they want to expand, or if they cease operation, then that's when it could change.
So Lilith, as a way to kind of move this along, are you aware of non-conforming bed and breakfasts in our UGA? Because they're gonna need to be in our UGA in order to be annexed at some point, so they're
Mhm.
likely under our code regulations in a lot of different ways. Are you aware of non-conforming bed and breakfasts in our UGA currently?
Yes, I am. And now that we've limited the number of bedrooms a B&B can be, there are more of them. Because some
Okay.
of them went in as 3. We have one that's a 6 as an old conditional use permit.
Uh-huh.
And so that one would have to shrink down in size.
Okay,
Moving on, just to ensure that we get through some more of this, is that the lot size has to be a minimum of 6,000 square feet. That's already in the code. We're just adding it to the criteria so that we do the full review in one section of code.
Yeah.
Again, clarity. Then residential design standards. This is standards related to manufactured housing. I had
Yeah.
talked with, yeah, we're trying to consolidate the residential design standards, so we're moving this entire chapter or deleting the sections that we don't find necessary. So there is some extra strikeout here that you won't find being replaced. We are keeping manufactured home standards in a modified form, residential standards in a slightly modified form. Our senior planner recommended that the eave overhangs be just stricken altogether, as well as the trim. And that's on page 27 of 36 and 26 of 35, 27 of 35. So items K and D are removed.
Lilith, before you zip on, excuse me. I think eliminating the eaves from hanging over is a safety issue.
Well, they can submit a house permit right now that doesn't have eaves, and we have had some come through. They just need to call it a certain type of design, because the code does allow for like English Tudor or other types of design. Is it good building practice when we have all this snow? I don't think so. And we typically recommend that, you know, people doing a design have an eave overhang. But they get to decide that, and so that's why we removed it.
So they can't come back on the city for anything.
No. The
what-
remainder of this,
my question would be, why can't we insist on that 12 inches, at least 12 inches overhang? As a code, city code, because we have the snow issue.
well, we could, but who's to say 12 is enough?
Well, it's better than nothing, you know?
Yeah, but it's not our liability. They get to design the house the way they want.
Hmm.
And then what we're running into is that manufactured homes don't have a 12-inch overhang, and we can't not allow them. We have to allow manufactured homes.
Active.
Yep. So that was part of that discussion. Sorry to push it, but we'll move on to 28 of 35. This is the commercial industrial chart. And we're talking about allowing public structures to have a 0 front yard setback. And there's a little notation there about an example of our front street park cover over the restrooms. You know, you want that right next to the right of way, so people walk off the sidewalk and they're in a covered area, and it just makes sense to have that available to them. So we're asking this to modify the code there. You'll also see, if you're paying attention to the notices, that we're processing that as a variance right now with the hearing examiner, as well as the one down on the old WashDOT lot. Page 30 of 35, this is a new chapter requested by Public Works, and it just allows for inspection and notification requirements when people are developing streets and sidewalks or doing repair and maintenance. So that entire section is just a new checks and balance. And then page 32 of 35, we already require traffic impact analysis, and now we're codifying that, what it looks like and what it includes. So that's a important thing for consistency, both internal and external.
Bill, I had a question on the traffic impact analysis.
Yes.
Why don't we have, this is the code part, right? Why don't we have somewhere where we're saying it has to be conducted on the weekends? I thought that's what we initiated. I don't see that part that, when we initiate a TIA, it's not.
Yeah, I don't think we have anything about when it's applied. Well, we have just if the development hits a certain capacity or traffic, but we don't have when the study's actually done. That's more of a policy direction. And our comprehensive plan has that policy in it. And then it's subject to being flexible depending on the development itself. Right now, we're requiring both. What's required by WashDOT, and we're requiring that weekend review.
So the weekend review is in the comprehensive plan. So they do have to, when they do that TIA, they have use the weekend when when you got the tourists here, and so because we have 9 months of tourists at least, so that's a realistic expectation. Okay, I just wanted it somewhere, that's all. So
Yeah.
we went through quite a battle to get that.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, and then the last page is just a section of code that got moved into a new title 14.5 that we talked about earlier. So that's where we are right now for code consistency. I know we only have a few minutes left. Actually, we're all over with my time for both code sections, but the cottage housing is pretty important, and I don't know to what extent the council members want to talk about cottage housing. It is going to the Planning Commission for hearing tomorrow, and I can extend it to another agenda item. Mayor, you're in charge of the agenda, so if you'd like just to move on and have it moved, or if there are any, must know questions, maybe now's the time to throw them out and we just maybe don't talk about them as much. How would you like to proceed, Mayor?
We don't need 20 minutes to talk about the retreat, so if they want to tackle this in 20 minutes, so we should.
I would want to tackle this.
Yeah.
I had a question.
I wanted to go
Oh,
back to the
and Sharon's got a couple of questions from that cover sheet.
tab A, page 1. C. So we're gonna permit parking in alleys for bed and breakfast. Who's maintaining the alley?
There's no change to the alley policy. It's, they still have to sign a waiver. an indemnity waiver to use the alley for access.
Okay, so this statement does not mean that if they're gonna use it, the city's gotta maintain the alley. Okay,
Any more than.
Right.
Right.
okay.
So Lilith, I had a question on, has to do with cottages. Are we ready for that?
Well, Sharon wants to.
Oh,
Yeah, I think I-
No, no,
yeah.
I'm sorry. I thought you-
Yeah, that was, I just,
That-
wanted to know about the eave overhangs and does that make the city liable and
Yeah.
the alleys, if we're gonna put bed and breakfast in them. I didn't know if that automatically meant we had to maintain them.
No.
Okay,
All right, let's go ahead and do some cottage questions.
Cottage. All right, what do you got, Zeke?
So first, to clarify, the hearing that's coming up tomorrow. Once that's over, if we have the hearing tomorrow, then they're gonna accept the code as it is, that they've got here. Is that what that means?
The planning commission has been talking about this code or versions of this code for more than 6 months. So I think they're feeling pretty good about what's drafted right now. But that's not to say they can't change it. So they'll do the hearing and they'll make a recommendation. And that recommendation may include further modification.
So my concern is, how do we prevent? So you have a 6,000 square foot lot that you can put 4 cottages on, one way or the other, okay? So how do you prevent that from becoming second homes? They're smaller, they're cheaper. It totally defeats the idea of what we're trying to do. And I don't know what the city can do about it, but that's one of the reservations I have is, do we have any control over that? That question, or do we hold the cottage thing up until we get done with inclusionary zoning where you require people to provide some affordable housing? I don't know, but my concern is that they put these cottages in there and they're smaller, but nothing guarantees that they won't become second homes as far as I can tell.
Yeah, there's no speculation. Just kind of piggybacking off of what you said, I was thinking about this in, again, speculation, but we do live in, for lack of a better term, an irrational housing market that's fueled by tourism dollars and second home buyers and those with frankly incredible means. So kind of piggybacking off what Zeke said, it got me wondering, do we have any data regarding how allowing cottage housing positively affects workforce housing? Do we have any proof of concept for tourism-based communities like ours, Lilith? Because I know there's a lot of information out there, but I don't know if that information is out there. Do you have any insight for us?
What we know and the purpose for doing the cottage housing was to provide diversity of our housing types. The cottage housing does that. It allows for smaller units, which right now our lots are being built to the maximum extent possible. Or we're having apartments go in on lots where the zoning allows it. And then we find that those apartments are typically small. I did talk with another jurisdiction and they're finding very much the same issue. That's how housing is being built right now. So the cottage housing does provide a really good alternative for the landowner. For example, off of Orchard Street, we have those 2 large vacant lots just west of the tennis courts. One of them was recently bought by a group of individuals who wanted to originally do small housing, and then after they bought it, they're new to this process. They realized that they had a minimum lot size of 6,000 square feet. So they regrouped and they were just going to do 3 lots. When we showed them the cottage housing, let them know that this is something the city has had on their docket for a while and the planning commission was moving forward. it was exciting to them because it went back to their original concept. They wanted to build a little neighborhood community, smaller units. We don't have a way of regulating who buys a property in any way, shape, or form. And even with the inclusionary zoning, they, as it might turn out, they'd still have some market rate homes and then some inclusionary homes. We still don't have a way of regulating who goes into the market rate homes. We would assume that, you know, somebody of lower income means would be living there full time, obviously. But cottage housing was intended to diversify the housing stock. So does that help answer your question? It's what we're lacking.
That's kind of what we did with the ADUs. It diversified our housing stock, but it didn't really provide. It provided maybe more affordable unless they got turned into a bed and breakfast. So that's a real concern I have. And I don't have a good answer for it either, because are they going to just build if they can't build cottages, are they just going to build a huge house there? And that's totally out of reach. But I'm concerned that nothing prevents somebody from recognizing that's a lower price and turning it into a second home. And so we really haven't diversified our housing stock. We have allowed someone to have another home besides the one they've already got.
Well, diversifies the size of homes is what we're doing, right?
Yeah, but you know, the thing we're after is affordable housing of some kind. So we're not getting at it, is what I'm trying to say. And I just want to bring that up for the council because that was a concern. I don't have an answer myself. I know we can't determine who they sell their stuff to.
Right.
That's out of our hands. But it's just frustrating.
Yeah.
That's very possible result from us building smaller homes. There's nothing stopping it from turning into second homes. You know.
Welcome to a
And
place
that,
you don't want to be.
yeah, and that would be true of any home we built.
Anything.
Yeah. So, you know, the cottage housing just gives us an opportunity to build more smaller units, which people aren't going to want to pay $1 million for in the current market. I don't know what it'll look like down the line, but
okay. I have another question, but I'll let somebody else ask you.
You know, I think both Zeke and Clint make good points, and both density and diversity, those two words, don't necessarily create workforce housing. So we can't necessarily equate them. You know, I get tired of hearing diversity, density, we're gonna have workforce housing. I think the ADU thing, all that density went in, I'm, as far as I can tell, most of those aren't even rented out to the community. I think you were gonna check on that, Lilith, and see how many of those got rented out. So, you know, to Clint's point, he's being very practical. He's saying, okay, what are the studies on this? What happened in other towns? When they went ahead with this stuff, what are the results? My relatives have a place in Mammoth, and that's all mansions, and it's like 80% second homes. You know, it isn't the community that we're visioning. So while there are issues with it, we could maybe mitigate them like Clint is suggesting, and we shouldn't kid ourselves that those two words automatically are solving our community problems.
I don't think anybody thinks that they're solving, because if you look around, we don't see any solving. But what it does provide, smaller units do provide an opportunity for, again, the building's gonna happen. It's gonna be the large lotted, you know, because the demand is there. I mean, the demand for those $800,000 and up homes is there. So those will happen regardless. So if you create some smaller units, you create an opportunity. Do you guarantee anything? No. But we know they'll go for less than those huge homes that there seems to be an insatiable appetite for. Again, I mean, I've said it many times, without us being a way to capture housing for our workforce, without funding to do that, to say these units are ours and they are for our workforce, no matter what you build, it's going to be open to the.
I guess it just comes back to my point, though. I mean, there has to be data out there about has have these relatively affluent, tourist-dominated communities, have they put in cottage housing recently? And if so, how much do they go for? I mean, it feels like a fairly simple data, and I know you may not have the answer right now, but with a little bit of research, it feels like those are
Yeah.
facts we could come up with, so we could have some sort of point of comparison for what we're getting in for.
Well, you know what, who's gonna be doing that? It was in the state's budget to do, WSU in their research, municipal research is gonna do a study on tourism economies and the effects on housing, and it's gonna be both statewide, but also including looking at other communities in other states and what those solutions are and what would translate. So there is going to be a study that's gonna be much broader and much more in depth than we would be able to do to give us some of that data. So that's the good
Yeah.
news.
Yeah, and I can try and pull some too. Keep in mind, cottage housing is not, I think we're mixing a bunch of terms. Cottage housing, hopefully, I mean, it's number one, to provide diversity of housing types. By providing diversity of housing types and sizes, we're hoping to diversify the price ranges.
Right.
We're not saying cottage housing equals affordable housing. Remember, we have a lot of definitions of what affordable is. And we're not saying it equals workforce housing. We're just saying it diversifies our housing. And cottage housing, typically in past discussions with the community, has been the most well-received form of diversified housing. So I think we're pretty excited about it. We haven't had a lot of pushback, but we also haven't had a hearing yet either. So we'll see how it rolls forward. Are there other questions on the code itself?
Yeah, there was, it says in the beginning on 2 of 4 on cottage, it says dwellings will be limited to 20 feet, the height.
Yes, the height is restricted.
Yeah, so, but back on this other page, when you get into the code, it's got a chart that shows, 30 feet to the top. It's actually higher than 20 feet. So where are we on the height of cottages? How high can it be? Because it shows that.
So you see under item
like
C, go to the very last page of the staff report. You'll see under that chart, under C, it says cottage house.
Yeah.
This is
Housing, where
Okay.
different from these standards shall comply. So,
Okay.
so the 20 feet complies. We'll use the same measurement tool, so it will be 20 feet to the height of a sloped roof, just as a flat roof essentially. If it's a pitched roof, it'll be to that midpoint. So we'll use the same calculations, but instead of 30 feet, it'll be 20.
So halfway up the gable is 20? Okay.
Yeah,
Halfway, okay. I just
Yeah.
wondered because it said dwellings will be limited to 20 feet height, but that's what they're talking about.
yeah, we wanted to use the same measurement tool
the
as
same.
all the others.
So how high could a house go then at its highest point?
Probably 25 is the standard pitch roof.
For a cottage house, okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and they're limited to, go ahead.
Like the rest of the community or the majority of the community, this has been my favorite idea. My reservations about it, some of them have been stated. But other reservations include the idea of how they'll feel as cottages. And developers want to maximize their profits. So if we don't specify that it'll feel like a little cottagey village, you know, with some curvy roads instead of straight and parking spread out a little bit, maybe some trees and, you know, then it may end up looking like the biggest units possible stacked one after another as close as they can be. And I wouldn't favor that for the feeling of our town. So that's my other concern. It's an aesthetic concern.
Mm-hmm. And the planning commission talked about that quite a bit, you know, how much regulation is too much regulation. We know that when the city of Wenatchee adopted cottage housing, It took years for anybody to even try it, and I think several amendments to the regulations they initially adopted before somebody tried it. And that was because there were too many standards. It just didn't make it practical to apply to any specific site. So the planning commission talked about that quite a bit. They weren't necessarily worried about, like, say, a straight driveway to the back where the parking might be located. But we also talked about ensuring that there is a courtyard that they share, and that there are pathways from the parking lot to the units. So I don't know if this code will meet all of your concerns, because we did try to purposely maintain a very simplistic code in hopes that it actually gets utilized.
I guess, I would be real concerned if maybe if we can allow up to 4 cottages in an R6, that would be a real. I know we're gonna come back to this, but that right now is kind of a red flag for me. Because of the, unless I need to know more about it, but that seems like a density that in a neighborhood that I would agree with. So that's my concern.
Thank you, Zeke. I hear that. They still have to meet all the other requirements for parking, setbacks, building separation, and green space.
Right.
So at that point, they might be super tiny, but I can ask if we can make a drawing for that.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Well,
Yeah.
as Liz said, there'll be a hearing and we'll get a chance to talk more about this and we can talk about it as many times as we need after that hearing. So, but let's go ahead. We want to get,
Yeah.
one more thing to get covered and then we need to have a couple minutes for a break. So.
Yeah, so as you all are aware, and I think an invitation was sent out, your retreat is going to be on Friday, April 19th. I haven't heard any topics yet from any of you of what you like to cover during the retreat. I was initially thinking that we would potentially embark on a strategic planning process, but the mayor is going to kick that off in the fall. So in September, we are actually going to start a strategic planning process with the greater Leavenworth community. So if you have any topics, we can feel free to discuss them now, or you can email me. In the absence of any topics, what I'm going to propose that we do with that day is team building for the council.
Can we have some sort of, I don't know, since one of our first primary goals is affordable housing, can we have a discussion on, I don't know, possible strategies that are used in other places, or where we're at with ourselves? I know where we're at is we just don't have a funding stream. So we don't have land and we don't have a funding stream. But somewhere connected is a third discussion with the council on, possible strategies for affordable housing. Are there communities able to, come up with some solutions? I think that should be addressed as a council. And I'll keep thinking about it, Selby, so I can.
Yeah.
Would it be inappropriate for us to start working on inclusionary zoning during this retreat? Since it's hard for us to find a lot of time to put towards that effort, and we've been kind of kicking that can down the road, but it keeps popping up because it's really at the top of our priority list.
Ties right into the affordable housing strategies.
Yeah.
I'd like to see us review the comprehensive plan. Make sure that we all have read it and understand it. We're going to be changing it in a couple of years and it's supposed to drive everything we do. So I would love to have some kind of review of the comprehensive plan. And also the infrastructure issues. Just kind of an overview of that. I think that that's a huge thing for our community and maybe people feel up to speed enough on it. It's just complicated and sometimes I don't.
If you go off what Rona said, either I wanted a study session on our water, sewer and stormwater capacity where it is right now. An update. Either that can be, maybe we can handle in a study session or commit time, because I think that's an issue we're kind of not informed with, we don't know where we're at with it, and that is a concern. We have a stormwater pipe down the middle of Ski Hill, it's already at 95% capacity. Not the middle, I guess I should say underneath, so.
Any other ideas?
I love our new mission statement on the wall that came out of our retreat.
Yeah,
Lovely.
Yeah.
Looks so good up there.
nice work.
Pops out. It's nice. It's graphics.
Rona, did you join remotely?
Travis,
When?
you're Rona right
What?
now.
Oh,
What?
that's Travis.
Oh,
Travis.
What's
Why
happening?
did you do that?
I'm here.
Yeah.
Stop it.
I'll rename him. Well,
Yeah, rename it.
Oh, Travis.
So good.
Make master.
Did I pop up as Rona?
yeah.
Oh,
He
what?
did.
Oh, I didn't
Yeah, how did
understand.
that happen?
I thought you were going through an identity
Oh.
crisis.
Well, your beard is kind of the same color as my hair.
I thought, yeah, that sounds good.
Right,
Just
right.
All right.
Nice view you got there, Travis. It's a parking lot, but yeah.
Yeah, it's a parking lot.
Vegas, yeah.
All right, we've got a few minutes. Let's take a little break and we'll gather for 7 o'clock meeting.
Hey, Selby, is that another different login for me?
Andrea should have sent you your own panelist. You came through as a panelist, so that was right.